What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Redonkulous Gaming. Today we're back for another video where we're going to stack rank each of the covenants based on the Paladin class, and specifically the Protection Paladin as a spec. So a number of things that you need to know if you have not seen these videos that I've been doing. The Paladin is the number 5 tank that I've gone through now. The only one that's going to be left after this is the Warrior. And then from here, it's all going to be tweaks and changes because, of course, this is the week where it was announced that Shadowlands was delayed. This is a good thing, guys. It's a very good thing, and it's because we have so much further to go to balance these Covenant abilities, which is why these videos even exist. If this was a non-issue and it strictly was up to player choice as far as, you know, which Covenant you most identify with, we would not be here having this conversation, but here we are. And so, given the fact that Paladin, quite frankly, has been established in terms of gameplay style for quite some time, and based on what we know around the Covenant abilities is that, yes, they're likely to become more balanced, but some of the things that we've seen, and we can take a couple of things that we've seen from classes like the DK, you could argue that the Death Knight was actually the most tweaked, and now is coming to the point where all 4 of those Covenant choices now have a certain level of viability. Necro Lords kind of being you know, that one last question mark there. But I think we're going to see a lot of these classes start to go the way of Death Knight. And with Death Knight kind of being one of the 6 and one of the first of the 6 tank classes that I have been able to review, I went ahead and I amended some of those videos, and I even created new videos on some of the changes. So I'll continue to do that as we go throughout. But today we are talking Protection Paladin. And what I want to do is just kind of give you guys some criteria for if you have not seen my videos. I really grade the abilities strictly based on these 4 things. The first of which, this is a spec-specific grade that I'm putting on any one of these Covenant abilities. This is not a Paladin as a class. This is a Protection Paladin. If I am going Protection Paladin, and that's primarily how I'm going to be spending my time in Shadowlands, this is the way I would rank them based on what we know today, and today being October 5th. This is also early projections based on the early stages of the X-Pack. So Castle Nathria, we feel as though, had the raid testing done to the point where we have a good understanding of what those boss fights are going to look like. About half the raid right now is a single target boss fight. We'll see. Again, Blizzard did say that they're going to focus on tuning and changing things focused on endgame. To me, that means conduits and covenants more than anything else, but that could also lead to some changes in the raid itself. We also saw a whole bunch of new beta invites go out just to kind of open it up so Blizzard could get their testing for all the changes that they're going to be making. So, number 3, this is going to be focused on more than one type of content. In other words, I want my Covenant ability to allow me to do more than just one thing. And the one thing, for example, would be like, hey, if I'm a hardcore Mythic Plus runner, I still have to do raid in Shadowlands to excel in Mythic Plus, right? So I want to be able to raid and do Mythic Plus just as well as I want to be able to do things like Torghast. So this is going to be a stack rank based on the ability for me to do more than one type of content. And then lastly, I am completely excluding conduits. Now that Shadowlands has been delayed, I feel as though this is a valid way to go about ranking these abilities because the conduits are going to get so much tuning and they're so interlocked with each of these abilities that it just does not make sense to even throw conduits in here because they're going to be tuned down, tuned up, or completely removed entirely. Same goes with these Covenant abilities. So we've actually seen a rogue ability come and go and get completely replaced. I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but it does feel like at this juncture, seeing as we were supposed to have Shadowlands release this month, that the Covenant abilities are likely just going to be tuned up and tuned down and less of a rip and replace. So anyway, that's the way I went ahead and graded these. And as I went through each video, you can kind of read it on the screen right now, I tried to really kind of assess how the ability feels, what the strength of the ability is, and what that viability is, and it all kind of went into the way that I stack ranked for the sake of this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. My number 4 rank for Paladin right now, specifically again Protection Paladin, is Ventier. And a number of reasons why this is the case, but the primary reason is strictly the 4-minute freaking cooldown on Ashen Hollow. So let's go ahead and clear that up for you. So a couple of things that you do get that I'd like to call out that are nice things that you get as Ventier. The first of which is Door of Shadows is really nice. Paladin being like the second slowest tank that there is in the game. You know, extra mobility, always a good thing. So nothing that that I want to kind of turn my nose up at. I'll take any movement enhancers that I can get my hands on. But at the same time, you know, it goes without saying that Door of Shadows is on a 1.5 second cast. The conduit is in that system is really the only thing that's going to enhance that ability further, and we can't necessarily rely on that, as I've already kind of pointed out. But to get onto the actual class ability, Ashen Hollow is where you hollow a target area, and it's a massive circle. Don't get me wrong; it's a largely affected area. It's a heal as well as a damage over time ability. So if there are 5 friendlies within your giant circle, they're going to get healed. And if there are 5 mobs within your giant circle, they're going to get damage. You're going to have diminishing returns on both the heals and the damage if there are more than 5 targets in your giant circle. That is fine, okay? It's okay to have those diminishing returns. It's okay to have, the diminishing returns on heals too, because in raid that would just simply be overpowered. But if you're going to do that, shorten the cooldown. A 4-minute cooldown just feels ridiculous. And when you talk about class identity, which Blizzard keeps coming back to, is they want the Covenant choice to make you have more identity. Like, I am a Ventier Paladin. If I'm only using my ability once every 4 minutes, then I'm essentially just a Paladin that has a 4-minute cooldown buff that, you know, others don't necessarily have. And the second you move out of this, like if you were to PvP, not necessarily my focus, but the second anyone moves away from that, like it doesn't matter. Like suddenly that ability, poof, gone. They've ran out of your giant circle, and therefore they're not affected by it. Now, the one thing that this also gives you while you, the Paladin, stand in your giant circle of Ashen Hollow is that it allows you to cast your Hammer of Wrath every time it's on cooldown, and it's going to increase that damage by 100%. So that's actually really nice to be able to have that and not necessarily pop your wings to be able to start spamming Hammer. But again, it's up for 30 seconds. It's a 30-yard range. I don't know, relatively underwhelming for Protection Paladin. It's something that essentially becomes a raid boss cooldown or a Mythic Plus boss cooldown, and that's about it. You kind of just move on. You don't really think about it when you're doing trash or anything like that. And to me, that's not something that enhances my identity. If anything, it kind of deters me from choosing this ability right now. So a simple fix for Blizzard. Maybe you can nerf it if you feel like it's a little bit too strong, but please bring down the 4-minute cooldown. It kind of feels like a punishment. So that brings us to number 3, and for number 3, I've got us on the Necro Lords. Here's what I will say before I jump too far into the Necro Lords, is that I actually have my number 3 and my number 2 very closely stack ranked right now, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why. And the reason why Necro Lords finished at number 3 for me is because it's a rotational ability that you don't have to think too much about, okay? It's a rotational ability you don't have to think about really at all, which is kind of nice. It's something that can be used on a 30-second cooldown, and it's where you throw a hammer at your target, dealing a percentage of your spell power, and then it empowers your next Word of Glory to automatically trigger a Shield of the Righteous. So what it becomes is a rotational damaging ability, which also, of course, translates into additional threat for Protection Paladins, and then that also is going to automatically, without you doing anything else, enhance your next Word of Glory, which you're going to use just to kind of keep yourself up and give you more sustainability as a tank. You're going to be healing yourself, and then it will automatically activate Shield of the Righteous. So it feels pretty darn good. It becomes something that's rotational, and it's something that you can kind of identify with, which is the antithesis of the Ventier Covenant ability, which you're only using once every 4 minutes, if that. You might be sitting on it longer and barely casting it because you're saving it for a specific pull or a specific boss. So I feel as though Vanquisher's Hammer actually becomes more of a class identity choice when you join your Covenant, and it's just the opposite of Ventier to me as a player, and that's something that matters to me. I also really like the fact that it automatically triggers Shield of the Righteous the second you use Word of Glory on yourself. And you're going to be using it on yourself quite a bit, especially in the early days of X-Pac when you're not going to be as geared. So this is just something that I've actually really enjoyed playing with, and I felt like having an extra rotational ability made my rotation that much more smooth. And Paladin, Prot Paladin specifically, already has a pretty darn smooth rotation. Now, the other ability that you get is the signature ability. This is Fleshcraft, and Fleshcraft, I mean, you can say is relatively crappy, which, yes, it kind of is crappy, but a shield's a shield. So the fact that, you know, at a baseline you're walking around with a 20% absorption shield by doing absolutely nothing, or if you channel it near mobs that you've recently killed or an elite, you could potentially bring that shield up to a 50% absorption shield. So, I mean, whatever, it's more useful than maybe some of the signature abilities in terms of at least a tank. So I know not everyone's a big fan of this one, but I actually am, especially for Mythic Plus stuff. So that's where I'll start there. Now, as for my number 2, and this is what number 2 and number 3 are really close. The only reason why I have Necro Lords ahead of Night Fae, Night Fae being behind Night Fae being my number 2, is because I think that there are going to be some min-maxers out there who get really good with the Night Fae Covenant ability. And if you don't know what the Covenant ability is, I'll go over it very quickly. But first, quick shout out to Soul Shape. In its current form, I think it's actually really good for Paladins. Again, that extra mobility is a good thing, and the fact that you get a 15-yard teleport, and you can use that really, you know, right when you cast it, and then you get 2 more casts off during the 12 seconds in which it's up, is actually really nice. So giving Paladins that kind of mobility without it having like the cooldown that Ventier does on Door of Shadows, and being able to kind of teleport 3 times over the course of 12 seconds, that's actually really nice, and quite frankly, makes it so that you don't need to have double steed anymore, so it gives you a little bit more freedom in that row. So I will say that turning into a Vulpin, not the worst thing in the world as a Paladin, but the reason why I have Night Fae actually beating out Necro Lords here, and it might be relatively unpopular opinion, is because of Blessing of the Seasons. Now, Blessing of the Seasons is essentially a 4 buffs in 1. You actually cycle through them the longer you're in combat, or the longer you can keep, you know, chain pulling mobs. And you always start off with Blessing of the Spring, then it turns to Summer, that turns to Autumn, and that turns to Winter, and then it just rinses and repeats from there. Blessing of the Spring is where you bless an ally for 30 seconds. All these are 30-second uptime with 15 seconds left in the cooldown before you can cast the next one, so that's the same throughout. This is where you're going to increase their healing done by 10% or healing received by 20%. So this is one that you can mindlessly just either cast on yourself if you're taking big damage so that your passive healing received goes up by 20%, or you cast it on your healer, increase their throughput by 10%, and helps them keep the rest of the group up. So obvious utility there, don't need to go too far in depth. Blessing of Summer is where you can either bless an ally or yourself again, and this is going to cause their abilities to a 40% chance to deal 30% more damage. And this is going to be, again, a 30-second buff. So over the course of those 30 seconds, you can increase the damage of whoever you're blessing. So again, if you want to just passively cast this one on yourself, then you're probably not going to be able to maximize the effectiveness of this buff, and it can become easily wasted. So this is probably something you're going to want to have mouse over macro ready, so that when it cycles to Summer, you can put it on your top performing DPS and just let them just melt everything, so you're tanking things a lot less time than you normally would have been. So again, that's a 30-second buff. It's a straight out DPS increase, no questions asked there. Blessing of Autumn is where we go next, and this is where you bless an ally for 30 seconds, and this is going to cause their cooldowns to recover 30% faster. Again, this is something you can use on yourself if you need to take your tanking cooldowns off of cooldown faster, or if a healer just used a big cooldown, or DPS needs, like, I don't know, there's been a ton of times where I've been told, wait, I'm waiting for this to come off cooldown, don't pull yet. Boom, Blessing of Autumn, pull, go, it's off cooldown that much faster, and you're getting through the content faster, which is very meaningful, especially in things like I don't know, Mythic Plus dungeons where everything is timed, so every second counts in those types of situations. How many of us have been in a situation where we missed time in a Mythic Plus dungeon by like 5 seconds or whatever? This could have made the difference. And again, so that's something that has a lot of versatility, brings a lot of utility to the group. However, in order to get to that point in time, you need to have been in combat, or at least not have this buff reset back up to spring for at least a minute and a half. So keep in mind, these are 45-second cooldowns in between with 30-second uptimes. So I'm talking a minute and a half into combat, turns into Blessing of Autumn. Fast forward another 45 seconds, and it turns to Blessing of the Winter. This is where you add frost damage to an ally, and this is one that you can, again, mindlessly, put on yourself, and I would actually advocate doing so for this last one. Here's why: is that if you're tanking trash or anything that's really not a boss for that point of view, you're actually going to reduce the movement speed by 3%, and that's going to stack up to 10 times right now. So you can actually get up to 30% reduced movement speed by casting Blessing of the Winter on yourself. You can also cast this on an ally, and they can have the same effect for whatever it is that they're attacking. The other thing is that you're going to reduce the enemy's attack speed. So this is going to turn into some passive mitigation, because the slower they attack you, the less frequently they attack you, the less damage you're going to be taking, which means, that's, again, very passive mitigation that you don't need to think about. So Blessing of Winter is also relatively strong to either cast on yourself or cast on a party member. Doesn't matter, because if you do damage to something, or if someone else does damage to the same target, doesn't matter who you're buffing there. But anyway, this turned to be much longer than I meant it to, but this is a very complicated ability, and I feel like there's quite a few min-maxers out there who can really, really, really take advantage of this. So no surprise, it's kind of been this way from the beginning, but my number one right now is going to be Kyrian, and a couple of reasons for that. I know originally when this ability came out, everyone's like, yeah, there's no way in hell this is going live this way. Of course not, and it's been tuned down to the point where it now only throws 5 Avenger Shields instead of like 15 or 25, wherever it started. But it's still pretty darn cool, and what I will say is that you're not dropping aggro with this ability. So let me back up real quick. The first thing that you get is Summon Steward as a signature ability with Kyrian, and when you summon your Steward, when you summon your Steward, it delivers a Phial of Serenity for you. And Phial of Serenity is really nice because it cleanses all negative effects on you, and that could be a curse, disease, bleed, poison, doesn't matter. So you'll have 3 of those in the hopper as often as you need it. So that's something that's pretty nice to be able to use and leverage. Despite the fact that you can already cleanse yourself as a paladin, it's still helpful just in case your healer runs into trouble, or hey, how many of us have been in that pug group, or hell, even our guild group, where we don't necessarily have people cleansing, especially our healers, because they're too bogged down, or they're just not focusing on it, or their UI screwed up for whatever reason. They just cannot see whatever it is that you expect them to cleanse. So Phial of Serenity is going to be valuable for every single tank. We'll just flat out put it that way. So less valuable for a paladin or someone that can cleanse themselves most of the time. And so where this gets really interesting is Divine Toll. And Divine Toll is where you're going to throw 5 Avenger Shields at once, and it'll hit up to 5 targets within 30 yards based on whatever your current specialization is. So of course we're talking Prot here, but if we were zooming out and talking Paladin, then you'd be talking about, a Holy Shock or a Judgment. Judgment for Ret, Holy Shock for Holy. And there's not a ton to say about this other than the fact that it's really cool and it really helps your throughput, and ultimately is going to make it so that it's very rare that you're going to be dropping aggro on really anything. So the fact of the matter is that this is super strong in the way it exists today, and I think what Blizzard did is by kind of perfecting, because I do think that it will go live this way. I think it's in a really good place, but by perfecting the Kyrian Covenant, they now face the challenge of bringing the others on up to its level. So starting at the Ventier, working their way on up. And like I said, I do think that the Night Fae version can be min-maxed in a way that can be meaningful with Blessing of the Seasons. So I don't think that's a bad choice right now. You can make the same argument for Necro Lords, because that is, again, something that's going to be useful in all content. But overall, when you look at the big picture, the thing that's going to really kind of flip this thing upside down and put it on its head is the Covenant pairings. And what I mean by that is the conduit pairings within each Covenant. So those soul binds that you have, that's ultimately going to determine your loadout. There's a lot of tanks out there that are just looking straight at Ventier because they look at General Draven and they're like, yeah, there's my tanky boy. You know, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to soul bind with this guy. But for Paladin, that's not necessarily the way I would go. You can make the argument that Kyrian has, you know, relatively similar conduits, but that's why these videos actually are different than the others, I feel like, because we're not talking conduits and we're not talking things that are probably going to change a week from now. Paladin has been pretty established for a while in terms of their Covenant abilities. And when Blizzard went and they set the bar with this Avengers Shield ability, there wasn't one Paladin out there that I talked to that was like, yeah, I'm not going to go Kyrian. You know, Night Fae looks super cool. Or, yeah, Necro Lords is where it's at for Paladin. 100% of who I've been talking to has said Kyrian is the Covenant for my Paladin. And the main reason why is because of Divine Toll. So they've set the bar. They can't nerf this thing because they're going to piss off the majority of the Paladin community. So they really need to figure out a way within the next, 4 to 6 weeks or so, how to bring up Ventier, how to bring up Necro Lord, and how to make it so that there is truly a meaningful choice that they're going for. But kind of a no-brainer. Go with Ventier as of right now. Hopefully, or I'm sorry, go with Kyrian as of right now. Don't go with Ventier right now, unless you're just memeing, I guess. But Kyrian's the way to go. The bar is set for Paladin. Like I said, no-brainer, but I think it's an interesting choice when you get to Necro Lord as well as Night Fae. And hopefully they go ahead and they address the overarching Ventier, I don't know, underwhelmingness in their 4-minute cooldownness. Like, that's just, it's too much for me. But love to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below.